Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
Chapter 16. The River of the Dead. Jaxon, one infected is climbing near the right wall, Natasha's voice whispered sharply. Jaxon swiveled, eyes narrowing through the darkness. He saw it, a pale, clawed hand gripping the edge of their wall, the figure wriggling upward like a grotesque spider. Thup, his rifle cracked softly, the muffled shot echoing in the night. The zombie let out a wet, choking sound before falling lifelessly to the ground. Jaxon's shoulders relaxed a little as he turned slightly and saw Natasha beside him, cautiously peeking through the window. The fear from earlier was gone, replaced by a look of determination. And somehow, just seeing her there calmed his racing heart. Right, no need to overthink this, he thought. We'll get through this. A low, urgent whisper came from his left. Brother, zombies have climbed into the neighbor's house. Cindy's voice was tight, trying to stay calm, but fear trembled underneath every word. He turned, surprised to see her also peering through her binoculars, her small frame pressed against the window. Suddenly, a scream ripped through the night. No, don't come here. It came from the house next door, the one that had been quiet until now. Then another scream, then another. Shouts and terrified cries echoed from house to house as the horde moved, breaking in wherever they could, dragging the unlucky and the hidden into the swarm. Jaxon's stomach churned. The quiet street he'd been counting on was gone. All around them, the world had turned into a nightmare of clawing, gnawing, and screaming. He gripped his rifle tighter, scanning the chaos below. His eyes burned with focus. Thup, thup, every shot, every breath, every heartbeat, it was all that stood between his family and the hungry horde. Jaxon, the gate, Natasha's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. Jaxon's eyes snapped to it. He fired his rifle again and again, each bullet finding its mark. Jaxon's eyes snapped to it. He fired his rifle again and again, each bullet finding its mark. One's climbing the left side of the gate, Natasha called out again. Thup, another zombie twisted and fell, dead before it could reach the top. Near the walls, Cindy whispered from the other window. One of them had managed to slip inside, but, thup, another clean shot, another body hitting the ground. Natasha and Cindy had become his extra set of eyes, scanning the streets, pointing out when a zombie tried to climb, jump, or squeeze through. Every word they whispered kept him on edge, but it also kept him alive. Bam, 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 the swarm was pushing harder, their growls and guttural roars filling the night. They weren't just pushing, they were charging like a bunch of raging bulls at the gate. Some of them leapt high, limbs flailing, teeth snapping, desperate to get through. Then, the cabinet they'd stacked against the latch toppled over with a loud crash. The metal of the gate groaned and creaked under the relentless weight and force. Thup, thup, Jaxon reloaded, his shoulder burned from the recoil, his fingers shaking, sweat dripping down his temple. His shots were still accurate, but there were just too many of them. The side locks couldn't hold any longer. The crowd pressed in, pushing and clawing. Bomb, the gate gave way, ripped open by the relentless swarm. Fuck, Jaxon cursed under his breath, his heart racing. No. They broke the gate. Cindy's voice trembled, and Natasha's wide eyes reflected the same fear that was clawing at Jaxon's chest. Mom, lock the door, Jaxon said, his voice sharp and urgent. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned back to the chaos outside, raising his rifle to the window. Bang, 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 the zombies were relentless. They clawed and smashed at the reinforced windows, tried to push through the door, and shoved against the furniture they'd piled up. Each shot from Jaxon took one down, but more kept coming, pouring into the yard like a nightmare come to life. The air was thick with the smell of rot and the sound of snapping bones. The screams of the zombies mixed with the groans and growls of the horde, making every second feel like it weighed a ton. Is this the end? Are we going to die here? Jaxon's thoughts raced as he glanced at his family. They huddled together, trembling, fear etched into their faces. At least, if we die, we're still together. Then, a new, heavy sound cut through the chaos, impossible to ignore. Thup 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 thup. The ground seemed to shake beneath the heavy beat of the rotors. The air vibrated, shaking the windows and rattling the door. Above the screaming horde, the roar of a helicopter split the night sky, drowning out the cries of the zombies. Jaxon's heart skipped a beat. The horde froze, momentarily confused, their grotesque faces turning upward as the shadow of the helicopter passed over them. Did you hear that? Cindy whispered, clutching Natasha's arm. Yeah, Jaxon said through gritted teeth, his eyes narrowed. The wind from the helicopter stirred the dust and debris, adding a ghostly swirl around the yard. The helicopter flew over their street, heading west. The zombies turned their heads, growling and raising their arms, like they were trying to grab it. Some of them even tried to jump from the rooftops, but they just tumbled helplessly to the ground, not even close to reaching it. The weird, supermuscular zombie kept its eyes glued to the chopper, its gaze locked on the moving machine. The helicopter kept going west, slowly getting smaller and smaller in the distance. Then, the zombie let out a guttural roar that echoed through the zombie-filled streets, a sound so deep and terrifying it seemed to shake the air itself. Without even a second of hesitation, it started to sprint, its movements shockingly fast. Muscles rippled under its pale skin, limbs pumping with terrifying precision. Jaxon did a quick calculation in his head. It was moving faster than any human athlete, easily hitting speeds of 40 kilometers per hour. The horde paused. Even the ones who'd been clawing and smashing at houses froze, their grotesque heads tilting toward the sound of the roar. Then, as if they were responding to a command, the swarm turned and started to follow the strange zombie. Every single one of them, even the ones attacking nearby homes, changed direction. They ran and stumbled, moving together toward the west, toward the chopper. Thousands of undead bodies flowing like a dark, unstoppable river. Jaxon's chest tightened as he watched. For now, at least, the immediate threat to his family was gone. But seeing that speed, that control, and the mindless obedience of the swarm sent a chill crawling down his spine. Chapter 17. After the roar. Jaxon watched as the sea of zombies rushed west. Thousands of bodies moved as one, stumbling over each other. Some were crushed under the stampede, their bones cracking as others stepped and pushed their way forward, desperate to follow the roar. Then, something snapped in his mind. You bastards, I'm not letting you get away that easy. His shoulders ached, his arms burned from exhaustion, but his focus didn't waver. Fueled by a sudden urge for revenge, he aimed down his scope. Time for some payback, he muttered under his breath. Thup, thup, each muffled shot echoed softly in the night. Heads burst open, one after another. 1 express, 1 coin, and 0.01 strength obtained from the zombie. 1 express, 1 coin, and 0.01 speed obtained from the zombie. He kept firing, tracking the stragglers who were still within range. Every pull of the trigger made his arms tremble, but he refused to stop. After a few minutes, the horde had moved too far away for his scope to reach. The echoes of growls and roars faded into the distance. Only then did Jaxon lower his rifle, his breath rough and heavy. The silence that followed felt almost unreal after the chaos that had just passed. Suddenly, Jaxon felt a soft warmth press against his back. Jaxon, thank you, if it weren't for you, we'd all be gone. Isabel's trembling voice broke the silence as she hugged him tightly from behind. Mom, Jaxon blinked, surprised. Before he could even react, Cindy rushed forward too, her eyes glistening. She wrapped her arms around his side, her small hands clutching his sleeve as her body shook. You saved us again, brother. Jaxon's lips curved into a tired smile as he gently patted her head. Thanks for helping out earlier. You were brave, Cindy. Jaxon, another soft voice called. He turned and saw Natasha standing there, her eyes red and watery. She didn't say a word, she just stepped closer and joined the hug. For a moment, the chaos outside felt like it was a million miles away. It's okay now, Jaxon whispered, his tone gentle. They're gone. Slowly, they pulled away, wiping the tears from their eyes. The tension that had gripped them for hours finally started to fade away. I can't believe it, Isabel murmured, her voice shaky but full of relief. We actually made it. We got really lucky, Jaxon said, his voice low as he looked out the window. That alpha zombie started chasing the chopper, and the rest just followed it. Alpha zombie? Cindy asked, frowning a little. You mean that strange, muscular one? Jaxon nodded. Yeah, it's a fitting name, Natasha added quietly. For something that can control a horde like that. They all turned their eyes to the street below. What they saw was a haunting sight, bodies scattered everywhere, blood staining the pavement, and parts of houses torn apart. Among the wreckage, a few zombies were still moving, crawling weakly on the ground. They were the ones who'd been trampled during the chaos when the horde rushed out. Most of them had broken bones and crushed limbs, but since their brains weren't damaged, they were still alive, dragging themselves around aimlessly. There are still some of them left, Jaxon muttered, gripping his rifle again. I need to finish them off. But before he could even aim, his mother's voice stopped him. Jaxon, your arm, Isabel said softly, worry filling her eyes as she noticed his trembling right arm. Jaxon blinked, realizing only then how heavy his rifle had become. The ache he'd been ignoring finally caught up to him, and his muscles felt numb and stiff. Brother, does it hurt? Cindy asked, gently touching his arm. He shook his head with a smile. Nah, I'm just beat. Natasha stepped closer, her tone firm. You should rest first. You can finish them off later. A few minutes later, Isabel went downstairs and whipped up some quick food for everyone. The warm smell of soup and toasted bread slowly filled the air. Cindy sat beside Jaxon on the floor, her brows furrowed in concentration as she gently massaged his arms. Meanwhile, Natasha stood near the window, her eyes glued to the outside through a pair of binoculars. She scanned the streets carefully, making sure no zombies were wandering back. With nothing else to do, Jaxon pulled up his status window. Name, Jaxon Hawk, level, 2/121, age, 24, strength, 9.06, speed, 7.40, agility, 7.15, intelligence, 8.11, stamina, 8.40, vitality, 5.16, stat points, 1, passive skill, marksmanship E, handling and control have improved, aim faster and fire with greater stability, recoil is easier to manage, and shots are more accurate even under pressure. Coins, 93, he gained another stat point from leveling up, and the most noticeable change was his strength, what used to be 8 was now 9. His marksmanship had also ranked up again. Even without checking, I can already feel it, Jaxon thought. My aim's steadier now. As for the strength boost, I'll test it tomorrow. Now he had a clearer understanding of how his stats worked as they slowly increased. Strength showed how much power his body could produce. Speed determined how fast he could move. Agility was different, it measured his reflexes and control over his body. Stamina showed how long he could last in battle or heavy movement. Vitality decided how tough his body was. And lastly, intelligence. It wasn't just about being smart. It affected his focus, reaction speed, battle awareness, and decision-making during tense moments. For now, he decided to save his remaining stat point for emergencies. DMR bullets 100 rounds purchased, 20 coins spent. He restocked his ammo since he had almost run out earlier. As he skimmed through the system store, he decided to save the rest of his coins. The guns were far too expensive, the cheapest pistol alone cost around 200 coins. As for upgrading his rifle, he left it for now. It still performed well, and he had no need to change something that already worked perfectly. After resting his arms, Jaxon went back to the window and quietly took out the remaining zombies outside. Thup, thup, each shot was clean and precise, earning him another 13 coins in total. Chapter 18, The morning after. When everything was finally quiet, they ate the light meal Isabel had made. The warmth of the food filled the quiet room, easing the weight that had been on their chests. After eating, Jaxon went to bed. The moment his back hit the mattress, his body felt like it was sinking into it. The window reinforcements, I'll have to fix them again, he thought, his eyes growing heavy. I'll do it tomorrow. Before he knew it, sleep had taken him. He drifted off to dreamland with a small tired smile, relieved that at least for tonight his family was safe. The next morning came quietly. Sunlight peeked through the cracks in the curtains. Jaxon slowly opened his eyes and sat up, his body still sore from yesterday's fight. He looked out the window. The street outside was calm, no growls, no movement. But the sight wasn't peaceful. Bodies of the dead were scattered near their destroyed gate and along the road, lying still in awkward, broken shapes. I've got a lot of work to do, he muttered under his breath. Downstairs, the family gathered for breakfast. The table was quiet, the air heavy with fatigue and unspoken thoughts. Natasha, what's wrong? Isabel asked, noticing her daughter's pale face. She looked uneasy, like she'd seen something she didn't want to believe. Natasha hesitated for a second, then pulled out her phone. I saw something this morning, she said, her voice low. She played a video, showing footage taken from a helicopter. The shaky camera revealed endless swarms of zombies flooding through streets, tearing down everything in their path. It looked almost exactly like what they'd faced last night, buildings collapsing, screams echoing, and thousands of zombies surging like a tide. This was taken from the nearest safe zone, Natasha said quietly. The city of Dunlow, west from here. The zombies broke through it. Silence fell around the table. Each of them exchanged worried looks, realizing what that meant. Nowhere was truly safe anymore. Their home was in the small city of Grenton, a quiet place that used to have around 80,000 residents. It wasn't far from Dunlow City, the nearest major city to the west. Along with 3 other cities and 2 small towns, they all made up the province known as Verdun. Dunlow was the only place in Verdun that had managed to set up a real safe zone. But now, even that was gone. It's that alpha zombie we saw last night, Jaxon said firmly, his tone full of certainty. I'm sure of it. Then, what do we do now? Isabel asked softly, her voice trembling. If even the safe zone couldn't last, then staying home doesn't guarantee anything. What if they come here again? No one spoke. The silence stretched, heavy and uneasy. Then Natasha looked at her mother, her voice calm but strong. Mom, don't lose hope. You can't fall apart now. As long as we're together and alive, that's what matters most. She placed her hand on Isabel's. After all, we still have Jaxon. Jaxon turned to them. I can't promise anything, he said quietly, but I'll do my best. After breakfast, Jaxon turned to Natasha. Sorry, sis, I can't work out with you today. I need to clean up the bodies outside. Natasha shook her head lightly. It's fine, I'll help. You shouldn't do that by yourself. I'll help too, brother. Cindy said quickly. Don't leave me out, let's do it together, Isabel added with a small smile. A few minutes later, the family started working. Don't go too far, Jaxon reminded them as he started clearing the broken wood from the windows. He grabbed his hammer and nails, adding more reinforcements to strengthen the barriers. Meanwhile, Natasha, Isabel, and Cindy dragged the corpses one by one outside the gate. The stench was unbearable, the air thick with the foul odor of rotten blood. The dark red stains on the ground had already turned brown, and the crushed bodies of the zombies were twisted into shapes no human should ever see. Cindy covered her nose and gagged. It smells so bad. Just hang in there, Natasha said, trying to sound calm even though her face was pale. Each of them pushed through the disgust and fear, working together in silence. It was awful work, but they all knew it had to be done. They worked for hours under the morning sun, sweat mixing with the heavy stench of death around them. After Jaxon finished reinforcing the windows, he joined them outside to help move the bodies. Wow, brother, when did you get so strong? Cindy whispered in awe as she watched him drag 2 corpses at once, their limp arms scraping against the ground. Jaxon gave a small shrug. Guess my workouts are finally paying off. You should start doing some too when you've got nothing else to do. Cindy frowned but smiled faintly after. Maybe, if it helps me get strong like you. In truth, Jaxon was surprised too. He could feel it, his muscles moved with more power and less strain than before. If his limit before was 100 kilos, now it felt closer to 115. They kept working, dragging one body after another toward the road. Isabel paused and looked at the bent metal lying by the gate, the twisted remains of what once protected them. The gate, she murmured. Jaxon followed her gaze and sighed quietly. I'm sorry, I can't fix that. You don't have to, Natasha said gently, stepping beside him. We'll figure out a way. Jaxon nodded, but his eyes stayed on the broken gate. If the zombies came again, there wouldn't be a gate to stop them next time. Chapter 19, Mercy. 2 hours later, they finally finished piling the dead bodies about 50 meters away from their house. The air was thick with the smell of decay, but at least the streets near their home were clear again. Do you think we're the only ones left alive here? Cindy asked softly. Most likely, Natasha replied. I saw most of our neighbors die that night. Jaxon's eyes darkened. I'll check later. Isabel looked at him sharply. What do you mean, you'll check later? You're going out. Jaxon nodded, and her frown deepened. I can't just stay here and wait for them to come again, he said firmly. If I want to earn more coins, I need to start hunting zombies actively. You can't, Isabel said quickly. What if that alpha zombie comes back? That's exactly why I have to do this, Jaxon replied, his tone steady but serious. We need to be ready next time. I'm coming with you, Natasha said suddenly. You'll need someone to watch your back. Jaxon met her eyes and gave a small nod. Thanks, I appreciate it. Brother, me too. Before Cindy could finish, Jaxon cut her off gently. No, you can't. And you too, Mom, he said, turning toward Isabel. The more people who go out, the more noise we make. It's riskier. Just stay here and wait for us, all right? We'll be fine. Seeing that he had already made up his mind, Isabel could only sigh. She looked at both of them, worry filling her eyes. Be careful, both of you, please. Jaxon gave her a small smile before grabbing a bag and his fire axe. Natasha followed soon after, and together, they stepped out of the house, leaving Isabel and Cindy standing by the doorway, watching them. Meanwhile, Jaxon and Natasha moved cautiously through the quiet streets. Hold on to this, sis. Only use it if it's an emergency, Jaxon said, handing her the fire axe. He summoned his rifle and aimed ahead. They approached the overturned military vehicle from more than 200 meters away, moving slowly and carefully. Then, help, a weak voice cut through the silence. Both of them froze. You hear that? Natasha whispered. Jaxon nodded, his sharpened senses picking up every detail. Yeah, it came from that house. Should we check it out? She asked quietly. Follow me. They crept closer, moving through the gate and carefully shutting it behind them once they stepped inside the yard. We'll stop here, keep an eye out for any zombies that might approach. I'll make a little noise to draw them out, Jaxon whispered, turning toward the house. Anyone there? He shouted, his voice echoing into the empty yard. Almost immediately, another sound answered him, footsteps coming from inside. Jaxon tightened his grip on his rifle. The door creaked open, and what stepped into view made their eyes narrow. An infected, its hands and mouth dripping with fresh blood, stared at them with pure black eyes. It held scissors in one hand and pliers in the other. Without a roar and warning, it charged. Incoming, Natasha hissed, gripping the axe. Thup, the rifle cracked. The infected's head exploded before it even got close. 2 express, 2 coins, 0.02 agility gained from the zombie. Another one, Natasha whispered, her voice barely audible. Thup, Jaxon fired again, and the second infected collapsed instantly. They paused, listening. Nothing followed. Anyone there? Jaxon called out again, scanning the house. When no answer came, he gave Natasha a small nod. Carefully, they stepped inside the house. The door and windows were shattered, and the furniture lay in chaos. Blood smeared the floor and the walls in dark, sticky streaks. Hand me the axe for a moment, Jaxon whispered, unsummoning his rifle. They climbed the stairs cautiously. At the top, 3 doors awaited them. One by one, they opened them, moving slowly. The first 2 rooms were empty, but the third. Their stomachs twisted. A man lay on the bed, barely clinging to life. His hands and feet were tied, his eyes gouged out, fingernails stripped away, lips peeled back. His body was full of bruises and fresh cuts, bleeding in several places. Kill me, he croaked, his voice hoarse and trembling, teeth gritted even with his lips barely closed. Beside him, a zombie just like the ones they'd seen outside was calmly slicing at his limbs with a knife, methodical and terrifying. The stench of blood and the sight was overwhelming. Natasha stumbled backward and vomited to the side, unable to stomach the horror before her. The zombie turned its head toward them, a sick grin spreading across its blood-smeared face. Its eyes were pitch black, and it licked the fresh blood from its mouth as if enjoying the taste. This sick bastard, Jaxon muttered under his breath. Instead of fear, anger flooded through him. He gripped the axe tightly, his pulse quickening. The zombie stood up, still holding the bloodied knife. Then both of them charged at each other. Speed +1. Jaxon didn't hesitate to use the stat point he saved. A surge of warmth spread through his body, and his muscles tensed. His movements became faster as his legs burst forward with speed. In a blink, he reached the zombie and swung the axe down with all his strength. The creature didn't even have time to dodge before its skull split open. 2 express, 2 coins, and 0.02 strength obtained from the zombie. Jaxon breathed heavily, forcing himself to calm down. Then he ran to the man on the bed and began untying the ropes around his arms. Natasha, help me, he said quickly. Natasha hesitated, her face pale, but she stepped closer. The man's cracked lips moved weakly. Kill me, he whispered, his voice raw and trembling. It sounded like someone who had been shouting for hours. Jaxon froze. His hands trembled. The man's body was broken beyond saving, yet hearing him speak made it all too real. "Kill me," the man said again, his tone pleading, begging for mercy. Jaxon clenched his jaw tight. He could kill hundreds of zombies without flinching, but this. Then the man spoke one last time, his voice barely more than a breath. "Kill me, I beg you." Natasha couldn't bear it, and she turned away and ran out of the room, tears in her eyes. Jaxon stayed. He took a deep breath, forcing his shaking hands to steady as he summoned his rifle. He aimed it at the man's head. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he pulled the trigger. Chapter 20. Shadows on the horizon. Jaxon stared at the man's still body one last time. His hands shook harder, and before he could stop himself, he turned to the side and threw up. His stomach twisted, the aftertaste mixing with the stench already filling the room. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, then slowly stepped out. His head was lowered, his eyes dull, like all the strength had been drained out of him. Natasha was waiting in the hallway. The moment she saw his face, she understood without needing to ask. "Jaxon, you." Her voice broke slightly as she stepped forward and pulled him into a tight hug. Her arms wrapped around him firmly, her soft body touching his. The feeling snapped him out of his shock little by little, grounding him. "It's okay," she whispered softly. "You didn't do anything wrong. You only helped him, you saved him from worse." Jaxon let out a shaky breath and hugged her back, leaning into the comfort she offered. After a short moment, he pulled away gently. "I'm okay now, sis." "Thanks," he said, forcing a small but grateful smile. Natasha nodded, giving his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Let's go," he whispered. "We still have things to do." They walked down the hallway in silence. Neither of them mentioned what they had seen or what Jaxon had been forced to do. They didn't need to. The memory sat heavy between them. Before leaving, he glanced back at the room. His chest tightened. "I can't ever let this happen to my family," he thought. The image burned into his mind, fueling a deep, fierce determination. He stepped forward with a new fire inside him, one that was stronger than fear. They walked out of the gate without looking back. Whatever fate waited behind that house was already sealed. What mattered now was what lay ahead. They didn't talk much as they moved. Both were still shaken, but they kept going. Soon, they started roaming through the neighborhood, going from one house to another. Every now and then, a zombie would appear, wandering alone between the empty streets. Fortunately, the ones they met were the usual kind. They were still fast and strong, but as long as Jaxon stayed calm and shot them from a distance, they fell one by one without trouble. Each kill earned him more coins, adding up slowly. Inside one house, Natasha pointed at the shelves. "Should we grab some food?" she asked, looking at the canned goods and the stuff in the fridge. "Take what you want. We can't carry everything," Jaxon said. She nodded and picked a few things: frozen meat, canned food, and some spices. Just the essentials. They continued checking house after house, careful and quiet. By the time they finished the last one in the block, they finally reached the first overturned military vehicle lying in the middle of the road. Jaxon walked around it, checking every corner and every gap under the metal frame. After a long moment, he finally relaxed his grip on the rifle. "It's clear," he whispered. They stepped closer. "Natasha, start grabbing the guns. I'll keep watch." Jaxon positioned himself a few steps away, his eyes scanning the street. Natasha quickly picked up the M16 lying on the ground. Dust covered the metal, but it looked usable. "How do we know this thing still works?" she asked, carefully turning it in her hands. "Just take it for now. We'll check everything once we're home." She nodded, then leaned inside the overturned vehicle. The inside was cramped and dark, but she still reached in to grab anything she could find. Metal clattered softly as she pulled out weapons one after another. While she was busy, Jaxon looked around again and noticed a soldier's body half crushed under the vehicle. There was no gun on him, but something round caught Jackson's eye. He bent down and picked it up. A grenade. "If I use this, the whole city might hear it," he thought. "But it might save us one day." He slipped it into his bag. "Jaxon, I got everything," Natasha said with a small spark of excitement. She came out carrying 2 pistols and 3 M16 rifles. "Good, let me help." Jaxon took the rifles and placed them in his bag, while Natasha kept the 2 pistols. "Let's go," Jaxon said quietly. Together, they began to retreat from the area. But then Jaxon froze. Far in the distance, tiny shapes were moving. At first, They looked like shadows, but when he lifted his rifle and checked through the scope, his eyes narrowed. Almost 700 meters away, more than 20 zombies were wandering through the streets. They weren't fast, but they were heading in their direction. He reacted at once and grabbed Natasha's arm. "Jaxon," she whispered, confused. "Zombies," he said quietly. "Dozens of them." Her expression changed immediately, and without wasting time, Jaxon pulled her toward the nearest house. They slipped inside, checked every corner, and made sure no zombies were hiding inside. The place was bloody, the furniture overturned, the walls scratched, but at least it was empty. They locked the door and moved deeper into the house, keeping their breaths low. Minutes later, the sound came. Slow at first, then louder, then heavier. Footsteps. Dozens of them. Jaxon and Natasha peeked through a small gap in the window. More than 30 zombies were approaching, filling the street outside. Chapter 21. Strangers at the door. "Let's go upstairs," Jaxon whispered, then slowly led the way up. Halfway up the steps, he raised his hand, telling Natasha to stop. He heard something, soft shuffling coming from one of the rooms. Jaxon pointed at the door and then at Natasha, telling her to open it while he aimed the rifle. She grabbed the doorknob, took a small breath, then counted with her fingers. 1, 2, 3. The door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside were a young man and woman, both around their early 20s. They both froze when they saw them. The man held a small kitchen knife, his hands shaking, while the girl hid behind him, her eyes wide with fear. Seeing Jaxon with a gun raised toward them, they stumbled back, clutching the knife. "Who are you?" Jaxon asked quietly. "We should be asking that," the young man said, trying to sound firm, but his trembling voice betrayed him. Jaxon glanced at Natasha, and she gave a small nod. "Drop your weapon. We won't hurt you," Jaxon said. The two hesitated, then slowly lowered the knife. Jaxon followed by lowering his rifle, keeping his movements calm to show he meant it. "There are zombies moving around outside. We just need to stay here for a little while, if that's okay," Natasha said softly. At the word, zombies, both of them stiffened. Their faces paled as if they were remembering a nightmare. "No, you two need to leave. This is our house," the young man said. His voice shook, but his eyes stayed sharp. "We'll only stay for a bit." Natasha tried to reason, but he cut her off. "I said no. Leave now." His fear spiked, and he reached down to pick up the knife he had dropped earlier. "Calm down," Jaxon said, ready to raise his rifle again if he had to. He understood the man's reaction. If strangers with a gun suddenly entered his home, he would act the same way. "How about this?" Jaxon said, keeping his voice calm. "Just let us stay here for an hour. I'll take care of the zombies outside from here, and once it's clear, we'll leave right away." The young man didn't agree yet. His grip on the knife stayed tight. "I promise," Jaxon said, sincerely looking into the man's eyes. The young man's eyes shifted to the rifle in Jaxon's hands. After a few seconds, he finally gave a reluctant nod. Minutes later, Jaxon was already set up at the second-floor window, keeping his rifle steady as he watched the street below. Natasha stayed close behind him, a pistol in her hand. In the corner of the room, the young man and woman sat side by side. They kept their eyes on Jaxon and Natasha, tense and unsure. They seemed to be aware that zombies were sensitive to noise, so they didn't dare make a sound. Natasha tried to ease the heavy silence as she started a small conversation with the two. "Are you two a couple?" she asked softly, giving them a small smile. They hesitated before the young woman finally shook her head. "We're siblings." "I see, we're siblings too," Natasha said, pointing lightly toward Jaxon. "We live nearby, just a few streets away. So I guess that makes us neighbors." The young woman lowered her gaze, then whispered, "Do you?" Natasha leaned a little forward. What was that?" "Do you have some food?" the girl repeated, even softer this time. "Hannah, quiet," the young man murmured, but she clutched her stomach. Natasha smiled gently. "We brought some food." She reached into her backpack and took out 2 cans. Stepping closer, she placed them on the floor, then slowly backed away, giving them space to come forward. The young man hesitated, his eyes still filled with suspicion. He didn't reach for the cans. "Think of it as our payment for staying here," Natasha said, reassuring them. The siblings finally nodded, and their hands reached for the food. They opened the cans quickly, eating with a kind of desperate hunger. As they ate, The heavy atmosphere in the room seemed to lift, just a little. Natasha stayed nearby, chatting softly to keep them talking. Slowly, they began to open up. The young man said his name was Horace, and the girl was Hannah. Until yesterday, they had lived here with their parents and some cousins. But last night, when the horde came with the alpha zombie leading them, everyone was killed, except for Horace and Hannah. Hannah's voice broke as she spoke, and tears streamed down her face. Horace kept looking at her, his jaw tight as he tried to stay strong for both of them. "How did you two manage to survive?" Natasha asked softly. "We hid up there," Horace answered, pointing toward the ceiling. Natasha followed his finger and noticed a small square opening, almost invisible unless someone looked carefully. "You can hide from the infected," Jaxon said quietly from the window. "Don't zombies have a strong sense of smell?" "Yeah, they do," Horace said. He clenched his hand into a fist. "Our parents hid in the rooms downstairs. Our cousins were in the storage area. They found them all. The zombies kept searching the whole house. They almost got to us too. We could hear them scratching at the walls near the attic." Hannah lowered her head, shaking slightly. "But just before they reached us," Horace continued, "we heard a loud roar from outside. And then, the zombies just suddenly left." Just as Horace finished speaking, low growls echoed from the streets outside. Everyone froze, and the two siblings huddled back, shaking with fear. Jaxon quickly raised his rifle, looking through the scope. Not too far away, maybe 100 meters, the infected were clawing at the doors and windows of a house. They seemed really agitated. Jaxon frowned. Something had caught their attention. He scanned the house carefully, moving from window to window. Then, on the second floor, his eyes went wide with surprise. "Burgers, you're alive." Chapter 22, Burgers' Last Stand. "Hang in there, Burgers. I'll help you," Jaxon thought, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Bang! Jaxon flinched and quickly moved his scope. On the second floor window of the house, he saw Burgers holding a pistol with shaking hands. The loud shot made the infected stop for a second. But as soon as they saw Burgers at the window, all hell broke loose. The infected went wild. Their attacks on the house grew insane, like something inside them had snapped. They threw themselves at the door and windows with crazed hunger, turning the wooden frames into splinters. One of them kept slamming itself against the window until its skin started tearing, hanging off in strips as it pushed forward. It even stepped back, got some momentum, and then hurled itself forward like a beast willing to break itself just to get inside. The sight made Jaxon's stomach turn, but he forced himself to take a breath. Slowly, the shaking stopped, and his mind became clear. He was a hunter again. The moment one zombie's head showed through his scope. Thup! Its skull burst apart. 1 express, 1 coin, and 0.01 strength obtained from the zombie. Thup! 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 More fell as he continued firing. Bang! Bang! From the window, Burgers fired wildly as well, emptying round after round at the infected below. Minutes went by, and Jaxon kept at it, already taking down his 7th one. As Jaxon and Burgers kept shooting, one of the infected suddenly stopped banging on the window. It tilted its head a little, like it sensed something. Jaxon moved his scope. On the other side of the house, at a different window where Burgers was, a long cloth was hanging down the wall. It reached all the way to the ground, like someone had used it to escape. That strange infected broke away from the others, ignoring all the smashing and growling. It walked around the house, like it had finally found something it was looking for. Then it grabbed the cloth. Its claws dug into the fabric, and with one quick pull, it dragged itself up with a speed that made Jaxon's heart jump. The thing climbed like a spider, its limbs twisting. Inside the room, Burgers had completely lost it. He was standing at the window, yelling and firing at the zombies with wild eyes. "You motherfuckers, come to daddy," he screamed, a vein pulsing on his neck. Down below, a loud crack echoed. Bang! Crack! The steelboard window finally gave way. Wood snapped, metal bent, and at the same time, there was this sickening crunch of breaking bones, either the infecteds or something inside the house. Ah, no! Burgers snapped back to reality. His eyes went wide with terror as he stared at the broken window. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice quivering, as he backed away, trembling. With a way inside now open, more than 20 infected rushed in, clawing over each other to get in. Jaxon turned to them and shot one of the infected trying to force its way further into the house, its head exploding right there. But 3 zombies had already made it inside. Meanwhile, Burgers froze when he heard a soft shuffle behind him. He turned his head slowly. And what he saw made his heart almost jump out of his chest. An infected stood right behind him, so close he could smell its rotten breath. Burgers lifted his pistol with shaking hands and pulled the trigger. Click, click, it was empty. The infected lunged at him. Burgers screamed and threw his arms up, grabbing the creature by the neck. The zombie pushed hard, its jaw snapping open and closed, trying to bite him. Its teeth were just inches from his throat. They stumbled near the window, almost falling out as Burgers kept pushing back with all the strength he had left. The infected leaned closer and closer, overpowering him. Someone, help, thup. The zombie's forehead burst open, spraying blood and bits of brain right into Burgers' face as the creature went limp and dropped to the ground. Burgers gasped, stumbling back and wiping the blood from his eyes, trying to catch his breath. But he didn't even have time to calm down before more roars came from downstairs. His heart was pounding so hard, his instinct to survive just kicked in and forced him to stand. He spun around, desperate, and saw the long piece of cloth hanging from the other window. His eyes lit up with hope. He rushed through the hallway and got to the other room, but the second he peeked down the stairs, he froze again. The zombies were already climbing up. Dozens of hands were reaching for him, and they were way too close. Burgers turned and ran as fast as he could, panting, but pushing himself forward until he stumbled into the next room. One zombie almost grabbed him by the back, its fingers just brushing his shirt. At the last second, he dodged it and slipped inside just in time. Bang! He slammed the door shut and locked it, his hands shaking like crazy. Bang! Bang! The door behind Burgers shook hard, the old lock groaning like it was about to break off any second. He didn't wait another moment. He grabbed the hanging cloth and slid down fast, burning his hands as he rushed to the ground. Above him, the door finally broke. Crash! The infected poured into the room. Burgers didn't even look back. He just started sprinting, gasping for air while the first zombie jumped right out of the window after him, landing with a sickening crack but immediately standing up again. Burgers, over here, a voice yelled. He looked up and saw people, Jaxon and Natasha. Natasha, get ready at the door downstairs, Jaxon said, already aiming his rifle. Burgers pushed himself harder, running as fast as he could. The zombies spotted him and switched targets right away. They abandoned the windows and started heading straight for him. Chapter 23, Through the door. One infected was insanely fast, closing the gap in seconds. Its fingers were reaching out, almost touching Burgers' back. Thup! Its head exploded before he reached him. Burgers didn't even have time to feel relieved. He just kept running. Come on, Burgers, run, Jaxon thought, firing again. Thup, thup, thup. More zombies dropped behind Burgers, but even more kept rushing in from the street. Here, Natasha shouted from the doorway, waving at him in panic. With Jaxon taking out the closest infected, Burgers finally made it to the house, stumbling inside. Close the door, quick, Horace yelled from behind Natasha, gripping a knife with his hands shaking. One infected got way too close, practically diving toward the doorway. Natasha raised the pistol, her arms trembling, and fired. Bang! The zombie's head snapped back, and it dropped just inches from the door. She slammed the door shut, and Horace locked it right away. They both stepped back at the same time. Bang! The zombies reached the door, slamming their bodies against it over and over. Natasha, get back! Jaxon's voice came sharply from behind. Thup! He shot an infected that was already halfway through the broken window. Bam! 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 The doors and windows downstairs were getting hammered non-stop, each slam breaking a large piece. To the second floor, now! Jaxon shouted. Burgers and Horace snapped out of their shock and ran up the stairs. Thup! Thup! Jaxon fired again, dropping 2 more infected trying to crawl through the window frame. Bang! Natasha shot one that managed to squeeze an arm through. The zombie just fell limp outside. Go, Natasha, wait for me in the next room. Crack, crack. The downstairs windows and door finally broke. Wood, glass, and metal just shattered as the infected poured in. Jaxon unsummoned his rifle for a second and saw a heavy cabinet in the hallway. He ran to it and shoved it down the stairs with all his strength. Boom! It crashed down, blocking the stairway and slowing the zombies down. But one of them climbed its way up, pulling itself onto the broken cabinet. Jaxon summoned his rifle again. Thup, thup, the infected fell, but more bodies slammed against the cabinet, trying to climb over. When 3 of them finally pushed through and scrambled up together, Jaxon turned and sprinted into the room where Natasha was waiting. He slammed the door shut and locked it. Natasha stood ready, pistol in both hands, her arms shaking but steady. Jaxon raised his rifle beside her, breathing hard. "Don't shoot yet," he whispered. "Cover me when the door opens." He turned a little and aimed at the door, firing through the wood as the zombies kept slamming into it from the other side. Thup, thup, reload, thup, thup. Even without seeing them, his shots landed. Each random burst hit something on the other side. Little by little, the slamming grew weak, then finally stopped. Jaxon looked at Natasha. She looked back. They both nodded, holding their guns tight as they moved slowly toward the door full of holes. Jaxon reached for the handle and pushed the door open. Suddenly, a growl came from below. Grah, an infected shot its arm up from the floor, trying to grab him. Bang! Natasha fired before it could reach him. The bullet tore into its neck, dropping it flat. It twitched on the ground, shaking a little. Jaxon stepped forward and finished it off with one clean shot. Silence followed. No more growls and pounding. Jaxon and Natasha stepped out, careful not to touch the bodies all over the floor. They moved through the corridor with their guns raised, breathing hard. "Horace, Hannah, you okay?" Natasha whispered, keeping her voice low. They went into the next room and found the siblings and Burgers all huddled together. Their faces were pale and their eyes were wide, but they were holding their weapons steady. "You guys all right?" Jaxon asked softly. The 3 of them looked at each other before Burgers spoke. What happened to the zombies?" "They're all dead," Natasha answered. Jaxon grabbed his bag of guns from beside the bed. "If you're all okay, we need to move now." Jaxon and Natasha went first. Horace helped Hannah stand, holding her arm as they followed close behind. Burgers stayed at the back, breathing hard but trying to be quiet. They peeked outside. The street was empty, no groans or movement. Jaxon thought more infected would come rushing after all the noise they made, but no one came. The silence felt weird, but he took it. He didn't get lucky breaks often. They moved slowly, careful with every step as they crossed to another house. He led them inside a nearby house about 50 meters away and locked the door. Everyone let out a long breath, their shoulders dropping as the tension eased a little. It wasn't completely safe, but it was safer than outside. Natasha leaned against the wall, still trying to catch her breath. Jaxon looked over at her and gave her a small smile. "Your aim was great back there. When did you learn to shoot like that?" Natasha smiled back, tired but also proud. "I just copied you." Before Jaxon could say anything else, Burgers spoke up from behind. "Jaxon, is that you?" He turned to the fat young man. "Hey Burgers." Burgers' eyes widened a little. "It really is you. I didn't even recognize you earlier. I thought you were some kind of trained soldier. Thanks for saving me back there, man." "You're welcome. Glad you made it, but why were the zombies chasing you again?" Burgers rubbed the back of his neck and shook his head. "I don't know. I was hiding in my room like I always do, and then out of nowhere, they started slamming into my door." "I see," Jaxon said softly. Then he turned to the siblings. "Horace, Hannah, I'm sorry, but your house might not be safe to live in anymore. But you can stay here from now on." Natasha stepped forward and added, "We checked this place out earlier. It's cleaner, and the kitchen still has a lot of food." Chapter 24, Safer Apart. Hannah looked unsure and took a small breath before speaking. Why don't we just come with you?" she asked. "Wouldn't it be better if we all stuck together?" Her voice trembled a little, and she tightened her grip on Horace's arm. Jaxon met her eyes and slowly shook his head. "I'm sorry, but we can't travel together," he said without hesitation. "I still have my sister and my mom back home." He paused for a moment, choosing his words. It wasn't that he didn't want to help them. They seemed like good people. But he couldn't risk bringing strangers back to his family. "It's safer if we live separately," he continued. "Some of the infected are acting strange. They can track living people. If too many of us stay together, the risk of them finding us goes up." Natasha nodded beside him. "We've run into those kinds before," she added. "This is better. Don't worry too much. We're still in the same neighborhood. If something happens, you can always contact us." Hannah opened her mouth to speak again, still wanting to follow them. But Horace gently squeezed her hand and stepped forward. "Thank you for saving us back there, Jaxon," he said, his voice steady. And you too, Natasha. We really mean it. We're grateful you found this house for us. He glanced at Hannah, then back at them. We'll stay here, just like you said. Hannah nodded slowly, even if her worry had not fully faded. Jaxon nodded when he saw the sincerity on Horace's face. He had been ready to stand his ground if they kept pushing, but things had worked out better than he expected. By the way, Jaxon said, turning slightly, this is Burgers. I know him. He can be trusted. He lives in the neighborhood too. He looked back at the siblings. Maybe the three of you can talk and decide if you want to stay together. Then he turned to Burgers. Sorry, man, I can't take you home with us either. There's another decent house nearby. You can stay there if you want. Yeah, thanks, Burgers replied, scratching the back of his head. He wanted to go with Jaxon. Anyone could see he knew what he was doing. But since Jaxon did not invite him, Burgers did not push the issue. A few minutes later, they exchanged contact information. Jaxon and Natasha shared everything they knew about the infected. They talked about the alpha zombie, the smarter ones, and the sadistic infected. After that, Burgers spoke with Horace and Hannah. The three of them talked quietly for a while, keeping their voices low. In the end, both sides agreed it would be safer to stay together. The food here should last you for weeks, Natasha said. If you need more, just contact us. We'll help you look for supplies nearby. And if you see any zombies around here, let us know, Jaxon added. We'll handle it. We'll still be moving through this area, so we'll see each other again soon. The three of them nodded, looking a little more at ease than before. Thanks, man, Burgers said with a small smile as he bumped his fist against Jaxon's. Thanks for worrying about us. I think we'll be fine. We'll call you if we run into zombies again. Jaxon bumped his fist back. You two were amazing, Hannah said as she stepped forward. You weren't afraid of them. If I didn't need them for coins and improvements, I'd probably be afraid too, Jaxon thought, giving her a wry smile. It should be safer on the streets for now, he said. The zombies might not come back soon. Still, you should reinforce the windows and doors here, just in case. We'll do that, Hannah replied with a nod. All right then, we'll get going. Remember to contact us if anything happens. Jaxon and Natasha turned and headed out, carrying the guns they had looted. The two siblings bowed lightly as they watched them leave, and Burgers lifted a hand and waved. After they had walked some distance away, Jaxon glanced back at the house. They're pretty good people, he said quietly. It's a good thing we found them. Natasha nodded. They can act as extra lookouts. That gives us more eyes in this area. Jaxon smiled faintly. Hopefully, they'll survive too. Before it got dark, Jaxon and Natasha made it back home. Jaxon, Natasha, Isabel said the moment she saw them. We heard gunshots and growls earlier. We got terrified and hid. Are you two okay? Her voice was full of worry as she looked them over. We're okay, Mom, Jaxon replied with a small smile. We ran into some infected, but we took care of them. He did not say more. It had been a long day, from facing that sadistic infected to saving Burgers, and he did not want to worry her any further. Isabel let out a breath she had been holding. It had been a long, tense wait. It's good that both of you are safe, she said softly. You must be hungry. I prepared some food. Thanks, Mom, Jaxon and Natasha said together, smiling. Before eating, they headed to the bathroom. The smell of blood and rotting flesh still clung to them, a reminder of the day they had just survived. At the dining table, the family of four ate together, enjoying the warm food Isabel had prepared. By the way, Natasha said after a moment, we met some other survivors in the neighborhood earlier. She glanced at Isabel and Cindy. Jaxon and I fought zombies with them. That's why you heard the gunshots. Isabel and Cindy paused, their spoons stopping midair as they looked at her in surprise. There are survivors here, Cindy asked, her eyes lighting up. Natasha nodded. We were surprised too. Two of them are siblings, Hannah and Horace. The other one is Burgers from our neighborhood. Isabel and Cindy exchanged a look, both clearly shocked. Hearing a familiar name made it feel more real. So Burgers is alive, Isabel said with relief. That's good to hear. His parents were our neighbors. Chapter 25. Hope that kills. After the night of the Horde and the zombie alpha, they had thought they were the only ones left. Knowing that others had survived eased something heavy in their hearts. It meant the situation was not completely hopeless. We exchanged contacts, Natasha continued. If anything happens, we can help each other. As they ate, Natasha and Jaxon told them about Hannah and Horace, and how they had saved burgers. They kept their voices calm and left out the part about the sadistic infected. There was no need to scare them or ruin the quiet moment they were sharing. Can I get their contacts? Cindy asked, sounding excited. I want to get to know them. Then her gaze dropped to her phone, and her excitement slowly faded. I've been trying to message my friends, she said quietly. I don't know how they're doing. The word friends made Natasha sigh softly. She had been doing the same thing, sending messages to friends and coworkers again and again. None of them replied. She did not know if they were alive or already gone. Jackson's thoughts drifted to his Discord friends. He wondered how they were holding up. Those cautious punks are probably still alive, he thought with a faint smile. They never trusted anyone anyway. I'll check on them later. Sensing the heavy mood, Isabel tried to change the subject. Did you hear? She said. I saw something online. They're saying it could be a possible cure. That caught everyone's attention. All three of them looked at her at once. Isabel pulled out her phone and scrolled through the news. Oh, here it is, she said. The video went viral. I haven't watched it yet. Let's watch it together. She placed the phone on the table and pressed play. The four of them leaned in, watching the screen in silence. Inside a hospital, blood was scattered across the floor and walls. An eerie growl echoed through the halls, mixed with strange voices that no longer sounded human. Beyond a glass wall, infected bodies slammed against it again and again, their blood-smeared hands leaving marks as they thrashed in madness. On the other side of the glass, about a dozen people huddled together, trembling in fear. Some were crying, others frozen in place, all staring as thin cracks slowly spread across the glass from the constant pounding. A shaky hand held up a phone, recording everything, the person behind it begging for help and hoping someone, anyone, would see the video and come for them. In the middle of the fear and chaos, a bald man suddenly stood up. I won't die here, he said, his voice shaking. I won't end up like these monsters. I'm going to survive this hell. The others turned to him, startled. A woman stepped forward, her eyes filled with hope. Do you have a way to save us? She asked. Can we survive this? The bald man hesitated. Fear flashed across his face, but he clenched his fists and nodded. I have a plan, he said. I saw something like this in a movie. His voice trembled, but there was a strange excitement in it. If the infected only go after healthy people, he continued, then maybe, if we're sick too, they won't touch us. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed a small injector from a nearby table. A faded label on it read, pathogen sample. Without hesitation, he stabbed it into his arm. His face twitched as the liquid entered his body. He gasped, breathing fast, waiting. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then, slowly, he turned and began walking toward the back door, where fewer infected were gathered. As he grabbed the door handle, the people inside shouted. What are you doing? Are you insane? Don't open it. Frustration and fear flashed across the bald man's face. He shouted back, his voice trembling but defiant. Idiots, you want to be saved, right? I'm doing the work, and all you do is yell. TCH, pathetic. He snorted, squared his shoulders, and pushed the door open. Watch me, I'm going to save humanity. The infected outside noticed him immediately. One infected staggered toward him, growling low as it approached him. The bald man froze, forcing a smile even as fear filled his eyes. The infected leaned close to his face, sniffing him like an animal checking rotten meat. Everyone in the room held their breath, silent and tense. Then, against all odds, the infected seemed to lose interest. It shuffled past him, dragging its feet across the floor. The man exhaled loudly and laughed, almost in tears from relief. I knew it. This is it, he shouted. 2 saved humanity. Are you all watching this? I did it. I discovered the cure. He raised his arms in triumph, laughter ringing through the room. But before he could take another proud step, something slammed into him from the side. A fast crawler jumped out from under a broken shelf and latched onto his shoulder. He didn't even scream before it tore into his neck. The group watched in shock as he fell, his cure idea dying with him. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the room as panic took over, and then the video abruptly ended. Jaxon and his family watched the video in silence. After a long pause, Jaxon spoke up. Do you think his idea could have worked? Maybe he just used the wrong disease to inject. There's no way. Natasha was quick to reject the idea. That guy was an idiot. Didn't he see the patients around him all turn? If his idea actually worked, there would at least be reports of sick patients surviving, hidden among the infected. Jaxon gave a wry smile. If he had been in that situation without his system, maybe he would have tried the same thing and thought it was clever. They returned to their meal, eating quietly. What the man had called a cure turned out to be nothing more than a foolish, tragic mistake. Chapter 26, Rooftop Predator. After eating, Jaxon went back to his room to rest. As he closed the door, his eyes drifted to the PC sitting beside his bed. "I'll check on my Discord friends tomorrow," he muttered. Too lazy to do it now. He paused, then added softly, "I just hope the electricity and internet last longer. If they go out, I need to be ready." He walked toward his bed, one step at a time. Then his eyes narrowed. Jaxon stopped in place. Creak, creak. A faint creaking sound came from above. His breathing slowed as his senses sharpened. With his slightly enhanced hearing, the sound was clear enough to make his skin crawl. It came from the roof. That sound, Jaxon thought. Only infected make noises like that. A cold chill ran down his spine. There's a zombie on the rooftop. Instinctively, he summoned his rifle into his hands. Then came another sound. Footsteps. They moved faintly across the roof, just above his head. How the hell did it get up there? He thought. Did it climb? Creak, creak. The eerie sound echoed again, louder this time. Jackson's fingers tightened around the rifle. His heartbeat thrummed in his ears as he slowly lifted his head, staring at the ceiling as if something might break through it. He moved to the window, careful not to make a sound. With 2 fingers, he pulled the curtain aside. A faint shadow landed on the roof of a neighboring house. Jackson's eyes widened in shock. Did it jump from our roof to that one? But that's at least 30 meters away, and it didn't even make much noise. His expression turned grim. A jump like that, it's a new variant. The night hid most of its shape, but he could still make out a hunched back. It looked taller than the others. Its arms were long, and the hands looked like claws. This thing can't be left alive. If something like this is roaming around, we won't be able to go outside at all. He quickly changed into his black camouflage clothes. Then he moved to his usual position, steadying himself as he raised the rifle and looked through the scope. Good, it's still there. The creature was only a dark shape, but its position was clear enough. A moment later, the faint outline of a bald head came into view. The crosshair settled on it. Got you. He pulled the trigger. Whish. The bullet skimmed past the side of the infected's head. Blood sprayed into the night, but it missed the brain by a hair. The wound barely mattered. The creature let out a furious roar, echoing through the empty streets as it searched for its attacker. I missed, Jaxon thought, stunned. Did it react to the shot? From roughly 40 meters away, missing was rare for him now. His sniping skills had grown far beyond what they once were. How did it avoid that? Was that instinct? Just how strong is this thing? Before he could fire again, the creature snapped its head toward his direction. It heard it, even that faint sound of his upgraded suppressor. 2 glowing yellow eyes burned beneath the dark sky as the infected roared again, twisting its head left and right. It had not found him yet, but it was close. Jaxon ducked instantly and pulled back from the window, pressing himself against the wall. He took a slow breath. Status window. Upgrade suppressor. 30 coins spent. Suppressor LV.4 right pointing arrow LV.5 max. Jaxon blinked. Level 5 is the limit. He tightened his grip on the rifle. Good. That means the sound should be completely gone now. He studied the suppressor for a moment. It looked the same as before. Time to test it. Moving without a sound, Jaxon slowly returned to his sniping position. Outside, the infected was still searching. It had not found him yet, but it was clearly angry now. It leapt from one roof to another, landing with precise control, its movements unnaturally fast. When it passed under a streetlight, Jaxon finally saw it clearly. A bald head, hunched back. Its body crawled on all fours like a twisted animal, and its sharp claws scraped against concrete as it moved. Its muscles bulged in unnatural ways, thick and tight, as if they were barely held together by skin. Even worse, Jaxon could see its veins throbbing. Something seemed to move beneath them, like a living thing crawling inside its body. Jaxon swallowed. Disgusting. These things just keep getting worse. The sight alone made his skin crawl. Meeting something like that at night would freeze anyone in place. As the creature kept moving, sniffing the air and turning its head, Jaxon made his choice. He shifted his aim to the right, lining up his scope with a window in a nearby house. Jaxon pulled the trigger, and this time there wasn't even the slightest sound. The upgraded suppressor was completely silent. The sound of breaking glass echoed. At the same time, the creature snapped into view inside his scope. Jackson's eyes widened. In less than a heartbeat, the creature leapt forward and burst through the broken window, its body twisting unnaturally as it charged inside. Fast, terrifyingly fast. No, focus, Jaxon told himself. Kill it. He forced his breathing to steady and dragged the scope back to its head. Then he pulled the trigger. Crack, the sound of bone breaking and flesh tearing cut through the night. The infected was thrown backward, tumbling out from the third floor and crashing down below. Jaxon frowned. Why didn't I get the notification? He lowered his rifle slightly and looked down. The creature was still moving. Its legs flailed wildly as it tried to stand, stumbling like a drunk person with no control over its body. A large chunk of flesh and bone was missing from its head, blood pouring down its face. And yet, it twitched. It crawled. It tried to rise again. Still alive,